Alright, I don't know how long I've got on this recording, but I'll go with it. I've been detained initially on a Section 2, now it's a Section 3. Section 2 is 28 days maximum, Section 3 is 6 months maximum, can be renewed for 6 months, and then another year thereafter, and probably years in 1 year packets successively thereafter. I've been detained in Section 3 without any reason, just like I was detained in Section 2 without any reason. It must only be they think that I lack insight into what's going on, or rather what was going on, because it's not happening anymore. So they're literally detaining me for for having an unusual experience a few months ago, and for having the opinion today that it was spiritual and not any province of psychiatric terminology. It's a way of interpretation. I don't share their interpretation, so they say I lack insight, and they say if you lack insight you need medication, but you can't medicate somebody who's not unwell. So I don't know what they're talking about. I was made unwell the first time I was sectioned a few weeks before the Section 2 sectioning. I was made unwell by the stress of the environment and by the medication. I took one tablet, within 10 minutes I was off the rails. This happened while I was on this section too. One tablet, I've never taken them again. I'm never taking them again. It was like Looney Tunes level. But I contained it. And I have said before, look, this is a religious experience to me. The characters that are coming to me are religious figures. And I respond to any difficulties with that, with religion, and it works. I'm not having voices, okay? That's not how it is. But whether through poor English, ignorance, suggestibility to demonic forces, they don't want to know. They don't want to know. I've been asking the hospital managers for a meeting. These are people independent from the hospital, which I don't know why they're called managers if that's the case, for a meeting for a month. Nothing. I would have been discharged today if I would have remained on the Section 2, but they filled the paperwork out for Section 3. I had a social worker come to see me that I've seen before. The very first time I was sectioned, he was the one who did the assessment. Well, they did another kind of assessment to see if I should be on Section 3. And what we got was me saying, look, I know what you're asking for. You're asking for insight. But he got pushy with it, saying, look, it's not about that. I'm asking you straight questions. They weren't straight questions. They were very conditional questions in the answering. You had to conditionalize them. You had to qualify them and say, well, look, this is the implication. This is the root. If I think I need therapy, it must be because I subscribe to your way of healing things. If I can heal things myself, it must be that I must refuse therapy because it's connected to the psychiatric view, which I don't share. It's not how I interpret it. It's a different wavelength. But rather than that being respected, that it can be a spiritual thing in cause, in process, and in healing it, that was not respected at all. And so they're saying, we'll detain you. And they have no basis to do that except, as I say, a supposed lack of insight. And this is what they're like. They are dogmatists about their own view. They only believe that there's such things as psychiatric disorders, even though they've no proof for them. They can't prove that they exist. They can't prove that you've got a specific neurochemical array, or even an interaction. That'd be too complex for them anyway, probably. That means that you have this or that disease. They can't prove it. And all they know is by working backwards that they scramble your neurochemistry in a different way that is supposedly successful when they give you drugs. And they come with all sorts of side effects like sudden death. And I know that I've not been well in a different way from what they're saying since I went on their treatment, which is basically being locked up and being medicated. And I've never been right since. I've not had proper coordination. I've had a lot of twitches. Things that are easy to separate from anything that's problematic. And also, psychical symptoms I've had, like the mind going like a runaway train, but I'm in control of it. I can watch it, I can observe it, and I can do my best to cope with it. This is outside the realm of psychosis because it's something that's extra-pyramidal, they call it, which means it's being caused by the drugs. It's just a side effect. The drugs and or the stress of that whole experience. You know, it could have been a portal, the stress, the depression of the place could have been a portal for demons to mess up my mind biologically. But they wouldn't dream of thinking along those lines. They've not got a very synergistic understanding as it is, you know, in their medical model, in their biochemical model. So they're not going to branch out spiritually to be multi-tiered, multi-level in their viewpoint. So I reiterate what I said. This is a thing which came to me spiritually. I observed it with a clear mind. The voice of Lucifer. I had it confirmed in many ways that it was the voice of Lucifer. I got a little bit tricked by what Lucifer was saying, and maybe perhaps by questions about the distinction between God and Jesus as much as the questions about any distinction between Satan and Lucifer. But I moved on from the more oppressive aspects of that, oppressive to me. I did think that some of the neighbours were agents, or I thought they might be agents, but I never confronted them about this, and I was never aggressive to them in any way. And yet they've said that I was aggressive to the neighbours and thought they were staring. What actually happened is that one chose to stare at me for so long that I asked him if there was a reason why he was staring at me, and he proceeded to try to start a fight with me. And then another one stepped in that had just been waiting there and started talking very strangely. So this is all reasons why you would think people might be agents. We've got a fly in, because the guy that was here recently was defecating everywhere. So we get flies in really easily. And of course they follow you in. Also probably followed me in because of 2 bananas that went a bit sour. Probably picked too early and a bit moist. And for some reason the cleaning lady didn't pick up on the fact that I wanted them thrown away. But whatever. So this, I think, that came to me spiritually, was responded to spiritually, experienced spiritually. I'm looking at it with a clear mind. I couldn't have been more clear-minded. I'm observing, I'm hearing, I'm apprehending these voices that are talking to me lucidly, with offers, with taunts, with bribes. And as a spiritual person, for that to come to me, it's not surprising. You know, if you're exceptionally spiritual, exceptionally religious, if you try to be righteous as much as possible, and Lucifer comes to you, how can you not see a correlation between the two in terms of a religious factor? Then of course we get to the point where it's like, well look, this is problematic. And I'm saying, okay, I zoom back from it, maybe the neighbours are not agents of Lucifer. You know, maybe there's not a set of people that possibly even hear Lucifer's voice in the way that I was hearing it, which was very clear. Even despite all the strange behaviour of the neighbours. Let's just say, okay, maybe they're not. And maybe it doesn't really matter if they're agents of Lucifer or not. You know, despite all the strange things that were happening online, with every one of my tracks being liked by people whose names seemed to be constructed from information that belonged exclusively to my email account, things I was uploading. You know, never mind that it all seemed semantically to line up day after day, that people work for Lucifer and had taken an interest in me in whatever way, or whatever two-faced way, or let's wait and see way. Never mind any of that. We just say, okay, not agents. If they are, it doesn't matter, because I just handle it as a human being. Even despite all the extra pyramidal symptoms, I just zoom back from it because I don't want to give them any ammunition. You know, and it's really hard to keep 2 accounts, which is what they don't keep 2 accounts because they don't respect religion. I've not met one that respects religion, and I've seen several psychiatrists, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've seen 5 psychiatrists. One is just about ready to respect it. Just about ready to respect it, he seems to be. But he's the guy probably that was behind the Section 3 thing. And there was a different guy that did it in his stead. But if he's the main consultant, why is he not piping up about what matters? So, okay, now we've got a spiritual experience that I've zoomed back from the more problematic aspects. So they can't say, is he a danger to himself, even secondarily, because people might not respect that he thinks they're agents or whatever. Because this is the main criteria why they keep you. At least on appeal it is. If you appeal, they have to say, no, he can't go because he's a danger to himself or others, or from others. Any of those three. Maybe not the latter one, but definitely the former two. Is he a danger to himself? Is he a danger to others? Now they've got me saying on record, get out or I'll stab you. You're breaking the law, get out or I'll stab you. With my samurai sword. Which I said because I got broken into for the second time in recent days by my parents, both times. And it was getting annoying. It might even have been the third time. And it was getting annoying to be broken into. Broke into my house. Because they'd been talking to the neighbours. The neighbours had told them all sorts of things, most of which wasn't true. Or they told it in a very skewered way. They said, for instance, that I was leaning against the door with my head. I'd just been seen leaning there like something out of Blair Witch Project. And what actually happened is, well, it never happened. Because the glass is so fragile. On the one door that was working, I would never do that. One time I tried to get a fly, and a bottle of water with barely any water in just broke the window pane. There's many little panes in the glass door, and it broke one of those. So I would never lean against that, because it would crack. There's nowhere really else to lean on, and the door is full of little windows. So that never happened. And there's absolute proof in my logic that it never happened. Notwithstanding I have the iron memory about that time. I've carried it through. Memory has got a bit damaged with all the stresses and strains of things, I think, but I wouldn't want to say damaged so much as it's just a bit impaired at the moment. When you're overwhelmed, it can seem difficult to recall things, but absolutely, I never leaned against the door with my head. Now, I might have had an emotional moment where my head was bowed a bit, but that's emotional honesty. It might have lasted a few seconds. I might have had a moment where I was looking down at the lock and making sure it had locked. Because the door was a bit flimsy. But this kind of just seen leaning with its head against the door as if it's some bizarre ritual or something, or some bizarre occurrence, it never happened. I was also, my mum has said to me that she was told by my neighbour that I screamed in her face. And another thing that never happened. It never happened. Literally never happened. So, there are things that if you start putting two and two together, you can say, well, look, to think that people might be agents of Lucifer based on their bizarre behaviour and their misreporting together and just coming to see my mum randomly in the street and talking to her and telling her things that are not true or that are distorted. Some things not true and some things distorted. Although I think with the case of the neighbour's report about screaming in her face, that was as a result of my mum knocking on her door. But basically, a lot of people just coming and talking to her. I heard them talking to her in a very jovial way, like sailors, but very artificial. And they would come along and they would just start chatting to her about things. To think that, okay, some of these might be agents of an organisation, based on the fact that I'd just written like 3 essays on religion, knocking it out of the park, on economics, knocking it out of the park, and maybe some other thing like philosophy or something. I recall I wrote at least 2, I don't know if there was a third, but you get the point. There was so much. Yeah, religion in 2 different ways and economics. So there was a bit of philosophy in there. But absolute dynamite essays that I'd uploaded. And then suddenly everything starts going weird. Online as well as offline. So to think, okay, it might have attracted the attention of some people who think that Lucifer is their lord. And maybe they think that Lucifer is different from Satan, like a lot of people have thought, in recent centuries at least.